Welcome back, Honors. Welcome back to it. Welcome back to your last flip about Rome for this unit anyway. All right, so the big thing about it is what we are going to do is we're going to take the fall of Rome and we're going to cut it out of this unit. We're going to push it onto the next one just because mainly for two reasons. One, I don't want to have to rush to get our next test in. And two, due to the fact that, like, you know what, y'all? It's going to be better for you anyway, right? Like, so for honors kids, it makes a lot more sense when you discuss the fall of Rome and its relation to the Middle Ages and a period of time that it started, ranging from about 500 AD to about 1500 AD, than it does to just kind of talk about it now and then be like, Middle Ages, out of nowhere, right? So the big thing about it, though, is we're going to have a very short flip right now. We're going to talk about like a handful of people, and then we're done, right? So the big thing about it, though, is we got done talking in class today about the Colosseum, right? We talked about the fact that children would graffiti their names into it. We talked about the fact that people would cook in the stands, the marble seats of the senators. We talked about this construction and stuff like that. It held 50,000 people, which is absolutely bananas and everything like that when you talk about like ancient construction and the abilities of them to access materials and whatever. Also, interesting little fact as well, is one little like last little fun fact, is there were apparently little water pumps on the inside of this as well, and they would sometimes fill it with water and have mock naval battles, which is crazy, right? All of this was done during the Empire period. The Colosseum was built during the Empire period. And the big thing about it, though, is you have to understand is that whole thing was started by Augustus. But it lasted for 500 years, y'all, right? 500 years. Augustus in Rome went through several good and several bad emperors, okay? So the tradition that Augustus started of having an emperor is going to have a lot of really good emperors and some ones that are absolutely awful, right? And they all ranged in family dynasties. For example, you got ones like the Julio-Claudians, which is going to be included in one of the guys that I talk about right now, and the Flavians is another one that I'm going to talk about later. But you've got tons and tons and tons. You've got the Aurelians, you've got all kinds of different families that actually were emperors that were choosing successors along the way, right? So some of the worst emperors that had ever been seen, though, are guys like Caligula and Nero, right? Caligula being pictured right here, and Nero being pictured right there. Now, Caligula and Nero were so bad, in fact, that they were murdered by their own people. Caligula being murdered by the Imperial Praetorian Guards, and Nero being murdered by his own military. But the big question is why? Why were these guys so bad, such terrible emperors, that they're going to end up being stabbed to death? And remember, we talked about this in class. They are not they're not the outlier, they're the norm, right? Most emperors were assassinated because they got very power hungry and they also got very aggressive. Out of 80 emperors, 8 of them survived into old age. So looking at their progression in their story, let's talk about Nero first, right? Nero was a very, very intense figure. He was a Flavian leader. He actually was born after the construction of the Colosseum and things like that. The big thing about Nero, though, is he is very well known for a certain phrase that your parents have probably even heard somebody say about him. Nero apparently played the fiddle whilst Rome burned, right? Because underneath Nero's rule, he actually is going to have to deal with this thing known as the Great Fire of Rome. And he has to deal with it by himself because at the time, his most trusted advisor before this was his mom, but he hated his mom and he actually killed his mom by kicking her to death. Now, also, but his mom didn't like him either. His mom tried to kill him as well. It was just like a kind of weird family dynamic. But looking at everything else as well, I'm sure Olivia Meyer's like, oh. So, like, the big thing about it, though, in general, is Nero apparently played the fiddle while Rome burned. Now, some of this relates to, again, the Great Fire of Rome that happened under his rule, and also some parts of his personality. So in his personality, he loved art, music, and poetry. Those are 3 big passions of Nero's, right? But going into understanding Nero a little bit, you also have to understand this concept of playing a fiddle while Rome burned. Well, the thing about it is, fiddles didn't exist at the time, so if he was playing anything, it would have been a lyre, which is like a little harp. And so looking at it, though, there was a great fire of Rome while Nero was alive. Now, everybody acts like he just stood there and watched it happen. That's actually not true. What actually did happen is he sent a lot of money and a lot of men back to fight the fire of Rome. It has much more to do with him being a bad emperor about who he blamed it on. He actually blamed it on the growing population of Christians, right? He blamed it on the Christians that were in hiding in Rome at the time, because at the time it was illegal to be a Christian in the Roman Empire. And so he blamed it on them and started having them murdered and executed in a vast variety of ways, all very, very terrible and disgusting. For example, if he had like a play that was actually acted out, like on stage, if he funded a play or whatever that was acted out on stage, and a person in the play died, the actor would walk off stage and then would be replaced by a Christian dressed up like him, and they would actually execute the person live, right? Another big thing that they would do as well is he would have them executed in the Colosseum. And another big thing as well, though, is he loved to have them killed while he read his books. Now, look, some of you are like, wait, I'm confused. What do you mean by that? Well, because after the Great Fire of Rome that decimated a large area of the city of Rome, he actually rebuilt a huge garden that he only used for himself. And he loved to read at night. And so what he would do is he would take Christians, tie them to posts, have hay wrapped around them, and set them on fire and use them as a reading light. What the heck? But eventually what would end up happening, his military grew to despise him. They actually literally forced him to dig his own grave and then stab himself in the throat and killed him, right? So the other guy over here, though, is probably the craziest one out of all of them. He's the third emperor in Rome ever. He is actually related to Augustus. His name is Gaius Caesar as well, but everybody knows him by his nickname, Caligula, right? Caligula is his nickname because of what it means. When he was a little boy, his dad, Germanicus, used to literally bring him to the front lines because his father was a general, right? He used to bring him to the front lines and used to plop him down, and literally he would dress him all the time in a little Roman military outfit, complete with not only a helmet and a skirt, but also complete with caligas, the little boots that they wore that had the metal soles on the bottom of them and stuff like that. He actually would have little baby ones made for him, and how you say small caliga in Latin is Caligula, right? So they basically called him Little Boots. Now, he was absolutely nuts, though, okay? We think that during his birthing process that he might have actually had the umbilical cord wrapped around his neck and it might have cut off oxygen supply to his brain, causing him to have a very, very intense personality, replete with violent fits. So a big thing about him is he was apparently covered in fine hair, and everybody referred to him as a goat, but if he heard you were doing this, he'd have you executed. He apparently had a bald spot on the top of his head, and if he saw you looking at it, he'd have you executed. He had a gold statue of himself built in the Senate, and someone was forced to go and dress it every single day in the clothes that he was wearing. He actually at one point, too, tried to make his horse a senator, or excuse me, not a senator, but a consul. He was like, my horse can do a better job than all of you, and tried to have his horse elected consul, right? That is ridiculous. Don't do that. Don't have your horse elected consul. That's insane. That's a terrible idea, right? So, now, other things about Caligula as well is he tried to ride across the water on a land bridge to try and flex on people. He had giant cruise ships made that he was at these disgusting parties on and stuff like that. Caligula is absolutely nuts. But one of the biggest things about him that he also did is apparently he loved to see people executed before his meals in a very certain way. And the way that he liked to see them executed was he liked to see them sawed in half as an appetizer. Some people like mozzarella sticks. Caligula apparently likes to see people sawed in half, right? That's disgusting. That's absolutely ridiculous, okay? He would like to see them sawed in half, basically put upside down from crotch to neck, right? And literally there's so many stories about him taunting these people and all this stuff. And apparently one night as well, at one of these meals, right after someone was sawed in half, he had a laughing fit, and the senators looked over at him scaredly, and they were like, what are you laughing about? And he was like, oh, I could kill any of you right now, and nothing would happen to me. So Caligula was absolutely nuts. And what ends up happening to him? The Praetorians stabbed him to death, right? So there's a lot of bad emperors. You got Commodus, the son of Marcus Aurelius, the gladiator emperor, that literally was drowned to death by his wrestling coach because he was so arrogant. You got Elagabalus, that was stabbed to death by his own brother. You got Caracalla, who pulled his carriage over on the side of the road and was going to the bathroom on the side of the road, and a Praetorian guard stabbed him in the back, right? So, a lot of good emperors, a lot of really, really bad emperors. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to clip in an old flip where, no, I'm not. Let's just keep getting after it, right? But then you also had 5 good emperors, right? The 5 good emperors of the Pax Romana are also the last emperors of the Pax Romana, okay? So the thing about it is, as we remember, the Pax Romana was 200 years of pretty much progress, right? Except for some crazy emperors along the way. So looking at it, though, is the last 5 emperors of the Pax Romana are literally considered the 5 good ones because they did nothing but try to keep the Roman Empire propped up and keep it solid. So looking at it, you've got several people that you need to know, not several people, you got 2 people that you need to know out of the good 5 emperors, right? So first and foremost, let's start off with Nerva. You don't need to know him for the test, but the big thing about Nerva is he just didn't mess anything up. This is Nerva right there. Nerva just kind of brought some peace after some chaotic emperors. There was actually a year where there were 4 different emperors at one time. Nerva comes along, and he just doesn't mess up, right? He brings the empire to stability. He keeps it from crumbling. Trajan is a big one as well, who shows up and literally has the empire expanded to its largest height on a map that had ever been seen. And this right here is Trajan's column. It's in Rome. It was actually built to celebrate Trajan's expansion of the entire empire to one of its greatest heights, right? Now, the thing about that column, though, is, as you can tell, it actually has recessed carvings along the outside of it, kind of like Assyrian carvings and stuff like that. It's very, very cool and very, very detail-oriented. And so if you ever get a chance to go see it, it's very, very cool in Rome. So the big thing about it, though, is Trajan made it so large that it was starting to get kind of shaky, though, right? It's kind of like a house of cards. Trajan got it so big at one point that it was getting very, very unstable, right? Well, then another guy comes along, and his name is Hadrian, right? Hadrian's very important, and there's a reason why he's in all capital letters, because you need to know who he is, right? He's going to organize the bureaucracy. He's going to retract the borders of Rome a little bit. He's also going to build a wall, right? Hadrian built a massive wall that went all the way around the outer skirts of the Roman Empire. And ironically enough, not for defensive reasons, more along the lines to kind of fence in the Roman Empire a little bit, to be like limiting their expansion to the point where they wouldn't get so big that they would chaotically crumble. Now, parts of it were used defensively, like this section of Hadrian's Wall, which is one of my top 10 places I got to go see before I die. Hadrian's Wall literally is built all the way through the middle of England, and it was used to keep out these people known as the Woads and the Britons to the north of the wall, right? The Hadrian's Wall still sits there today as well, which is really, really cool. Pius also is another guy that came along. He's actually no, that's Hadrian. Pius is right there. He just kept the peace in the Roman Empire. But then the last and most important one, this guy right there, is Marcus Aurelius, right? Marcus Aurelius is the philosopher king of Rome. Marcus Aurelius is considered the most progress-driven, most progressive Roman emperor out of all of them, because mainly he was a Stoic philosopher, right? Stoicism and Stoic philosophers believe that you should not allow emotion to cloud your judgment. And he believed that the growth of the Roman Empire should not be for him and his glory. He should believe that it should be for his people's faith in their government, right? That it should be for their belief in his ability to rule and his ability to give them the reaping of give them the progress of the empire and to keep them whole and to keep them happy, right? So that is Marcus Aurelius, and he is fantastic. And his son was terrible and was drowned to death by his wrestling coach. So the big thing about it, though, is all these guys that are really, really great, no amount of good emperors can save Rome because the fall is coming at the beginning of the next unit. We'll talk about that then. Y'all have a good one.